I have a husband. Well, everybody has a husband. Nobody laughs like that when a woman says, I have a husband. But I do. I have a husband. And you should see him. I should see him. Some of you out here know my husband, and as you know, he's a very quiet man. He's quiet and he's reserved. He's so quiet I've collected life insurance on him twice. And I used to come home, or rather he'd come home at night, and I'd say, how are things at the office, honey? He'd say, Say, you had that appointment with Roncom. What happened? So, what do you think? What do you think about that pilot that you're making? Does it have a cheese? You know something? I understood him. No, really, like, he has certain qualities that they're hard to describe. He has the intangibles. He's stupid. I don't mean stupid. I don't mean stupid in the sense that he is ignorant or illiterate. That isn't what I mean. I mean that he, little things, little simple things, he has to have someone help him. Every day there's a crisis. You know, like, do you ever go with these guys that say, honey, what do you think? Should I eat eggs or shouldn't I? You know, like who told him what to eat before you married him? Well, with my husband is, should I wear these socks with this shirt? So he wears his socks on his shirt. But sometimes it reaches a point. It does reach a point where it bothers me greatly. Like the other day, he woke up with a terrible headache. Awful. He was walking around moaning, groaning, and I felt sorry for him. I don't like to see anybody in pain. In fact, for the past, I'd say 5 weeks, every morning this poor guy wakes with a headache. And I would like to help him, but I can't, because I've told him so many times when he jumps out of bed, feet first. I keep telling this to this man. Quite a few years back, when my husband was working very, very hard, and he hadn't quite found his feet in this business in which he's doing so well now, he used to come home night after night looking like an owl with the big black rings under his eyes, you know, and I'd say, how are you? And he'd say, you're picking again? You know, and... You know, and I say to him, honey, you're really going to enjoy your dinner. He says, there you go, tell me what to do again. You know, this sort of thing. So I realized that I had to forget my role as an entertainer altogether and understand that whatever this man, the hostilities and the frustrations which he couldn't give vent to during the day, that he had to use me as a sort of a sounding post. And I didn't mind, but I did divorce him later on. Well, no, that isn't quite true. No, we kept threatening each other, though. But I'll tell you. But he wouldn't dare leave me because the bedroom set was in my name. In any case, he'd been coming home night after night saying, oh, I'm so tired. I have to go out again tonight. I have to go to this nightclub, that nightclub. I have to see this performer. So-and-so got a cold. I have to go in and see what he gets shots. You know, he has to go in and see what he can do. Actually, this happened. For weeks and weeks and weeks, he kept saying, oh, if I'd only have one night where I could just sit down after dinner and relax. Relax. Oh, what a luxury this word indicates, relax. So finally, one night he came home, and I felt sorry for this poor guy. He'd come home, he'd eat his dinner, and I would tell him it was good because he didn't know. He'd read the paper, and I'd shove it underneath the newspaper, you know. And one day I had candles on the table. He ate them, said they gave him indigestion. You know, he didn't. So after dinner, we have a ritual. He races me for the sofa to see who'll get the best seat for television. So he got there first, but I didn't care because I knew he was going to stay home and relax. So I went in the bathroom, took my shower, took all my makeup off, and it's a hideous sight. Took all my makeup off, put my pajamas on, because I expected company, otherwise I don't wear any. I came out, and he was sitting on the sofa watching a television show, and I think there was a movie on. And I came out, and he did one of those double takes. He looked up at me, and he said, going to bed already? I said, no, honey, I'm not going to bed. He said, what are you in the pajamas and robe? I said, well, we're going to stay home and relax. He says, who's going to stay home and relax? I said, we are. He said, you mean me too? I said, me too? You've been talking for months about if you only had one night where you could just stay home and do nothing. This is it. I don't think he meant quite nothing when he said stay home and do nothing, but you know, but this is his idea of nothing, believe me. So I said, yeah, honey, didn't you say for weeks you'd like that one night to relax? He said, whoa, wait a minute now, wait a minute. He said, you know, I was sitting in that office all day with the phones and no exercise and no fresh air. I'm not going to stay home. You must be crazy you think I'm going to stay home. I want some air. I said, well, go open the window, stick your head out. There's some nice fresh air out there. He says, oh, not me. He said, I want to walk. Okay. Now I know him by this time. I don't argue. Very quietly, after kicking a few things on the way, I go into the bathroom. Incidentally, we had two rooms, a bathroom and the living room. I go back into the bathroom, get dressed again, put the makeup on again, get into a nice suit, my coat, my chapeau. I come out, and by this time, he is completely engrossed in a movie on television. I come out, he says, where you going? I said, out. You and I, we are going out to get some air. He says, air? Like you never heard of this, you know. Air? I said, yeah, air. So he says, oh. Now, when I talk softly to Buddy, he knows it's time to get nervous. I said, dear, we are going out for air. So he jumps up, or at least he gets up, and he goes and looks out the window and he says, oh, it's raining out there. I said, yeah, but there's air. It may be a little wet, but there's air, and you're going to breathe it. All right. You know, like a dog in the manger puts on his coat. And we go out. Now he's got the umbrella, and it is pouring down rain, and he says, all right, honey, you're right, you're right. Come on, we'll go see a movie. What do you want to see? This is your night. Anything you want to see. I said, well, I understand there's a great picture at the Capitol Theater. It's been held over 6 weeks. You can't get in. He says, I don't like crowds. I said, you don't know if it's crowded. Let's walk over there. So as we approached the Capitol Theater, we lived 3 blocks away. There were a few people. He says, see, I told you it's crowded. I said, those are ushers. So he says, I'm not standing for any movie. I says, don't start making speeches. You didn't inquire yet. First find out if you can get in. You actually couldn't get in. Okay, what else would you like to see? I said, well, down at the, I think it was the Criterion, they had Somerset Maugham's Quartet. He says, I'm not sitting through 4 pictures. I gotta be in the office early. I said, honey, they're vignettes. They're small. They don't take much time, but never mind. Let's go further. Now we go down to those flea joints on 42nd Street. I said, all right, I have an idea how we'll enjoy ourselves. Let's walk back to the apartment. We start walking. As I head back in the direction of 54th Street. He gets a little nervous. Honey, come on. All right, we'll go in. We'll see Somerset Maugham's Quartet. I said, no, 4 movies. You haven't got time. You won't get out till tomorrow morning. He says, look, honey, look, I'm buying the tickets. I said, don't buy 2 because you're going to waste 1. I'm not going in with you. So he puts his money down. He figures if I'll see him putting money down, I'll run in. You know, but he puts the money down. And I said, honey, I am not going. Return those tickets. He grabs me by the arm. He says, come on, I got the ticket. Come on in. Come on. Now he pulls me like I stole his wallet. Pretty soon and I'm saying, let go of my arm. Don't touch me. And there's a whole crowd gathers around us. And I say, how do you like that? She took his money. And he's grabbing and I I said, honey, there's a crowd around. This is more of a crowd than they had at the Capitol. This crowd you don't mind. Let go of my arm. I'm going home. I don't know where you're going, but I'm going home. If I were to give you a description of how we looked, I don't think I could do it. Because only two complete idiots would be out in this downpour, walking from 54th down to 42nd and all the way back up. And we were so angry that we didn't even stop in at the delicatessen to get, some kind of nourishment, like a knish that lays in your stomach. So finally, we get back to 54th Street, to our humble little abode. We go upstairs with this dripping trail all the way behind us, put the umbrella in the umbrella stand, take the clothes off, shake them out, and he looks at me and he says, you know something, we were silly tonight. We could have stayed home and relaxed. First of all, in order to have a child attending one of these schools, you have to have given birth. So I want to go back to the time when I had a baby. And my husband, who usually is a very conservative fellow and doesn't rush, he's a very cautious man. But the day that I said, honey, it's time, get me to the hospital, well, we got from our house to the hospital in 5 minutes, which is something, because we live quite a few miles. And of course, he was so excited, then he had to go back and get me. But now this kid of ours, this rotten kid, I'll tell you how I know she's a rotten kid. You see, I never regarded her as such. But I met this girl on the street, this girlfriend of mine. She's not really a friend. We just know a lot about each other. And she's one of those gals. She has made the trek up to the suburbs. You know the type? I knew her when she went on the roof with Clorox. So this girl, she lives in, you should excuse the expression, Westchester. And she met me on the street and she said, you know, Jean, when I have something to say, I say it. And I said, you do. And she said, I have something to tell you, and I'd rather tell it to you than someone else. Fine, I admire this sort of candor. She said, you have a rotten kid. And this was a newsflash, and I was grateful for it. I said, well, all right, so what do we do about it? She said, it's your fault. I said, why is it my fault? I'm a rotten mother? She said, no, it's your fault because you're trying to raise this child in New York, and you know that nobody grows up in New York. You know that today people just don't grow up in New York. Whoever heard of raising a kid and growing up in New York? Well, that mixed me up, because I see an awful lot of grown-ups in New York. But I figured out they grow up in Westchester, they run in for a few days like this, you know, to mix me up. She said, you have no idea what suburban living is like. Well, it's true I don't, and I don't think she did either, because she was always in New York. But she said, move to the country, and you will see what a change it'll make in that rotten kid. Well, when she said move to the country, I thought she meant the old country. So I said, all right, it's true. I had to get out for a simple reason. Our building was condemned. And so I said, all right, I'll move to the country. Well, I did. I moved up to the country. First, you should have seen this character, this real estate agent that showed me around places. A fella with a ponytail. And they show you things. I said, I want a new house. He said, what do you want with a new house? You know those things don't last at all? You want an old house, one that has been lived in. Well, he showed me a few that have been lived in, like by pigs, you know. First thing he does, he shows me the pipes down in the basement. I said, I'm not going to live here. I want to live upstairs. He says, I mean, you know, I met another agent that showed me the bedrooms first, but, you know. No, because he figured the most important thing was having big, spacious bedrooms, you know, to chase around like this, to get your exercise. So this guy showed me the basement, the cellars. This wasn't even a finished basement. You know, nowadays the whole thing is the finished basement. So he showed me the pipes. What do I know from pipes? I looked at him, I said, they're beautiful. He said, you don't know. He said, these are not copper. He said, now the new thing is copper pipes. He said, these pipes will never corrode. These pipes could last a lifetime. In fact, the people built this house 30 years ago, and they just put in all new plumbing last year. Now, I said to him, look, there are important things. How far are we from the school? Because I have a youngster who, although she's not attending school just yet, I expect her to start school shortly. He said, well, you'd be surprised. A little fresh air in the morning, you walk across that park, and I said, how far is it from here to the school? He says, well, some kids walk fast and some kids walk a little slow. And I said, look, how far? He says, well, it's exactly 4 blocks as the crow flies. I said, I'm not sending a crow to school, I'm sending a girl. It turned out that if you weren't a crow, it was a couple of miles, you know. So I said, no, I'm sorry. This is not the type of a home I want. Now, will you please show me a new ranch type of home? I expect my kid to have all the illnesses that children have, and I don't want to run up and down stairs 14, 15 times a day. And I don't want with the basement, I want the one. He says, now you're talking. Now you're talking. Anyone wants to look at an old house is crazy. I said, that was your idea, wasn't it? All right, now he shows me a new ranch house, and he says, look at the plumbing. Look at the pipes. They're copper, not that other stuff that'll rot in a couple of years. Well, it was not old. It was a new house, but it had a feeling of having been lived in. That's because it was one of the model houses that had been lived in. Nice place with a great big picture window for spying. And, oh, look, she came in 11 o'clock. How do you like that? Everything your neighbor's doing, And, of course, they always know when you're going out on an important date, you're not wearing the pants, the long hostess pajamas. But, so anyhow, I did. I moved to the country like this girlfriend had suggested. And I don't have to tell you that the first thing that happens when you move to a suburban community is that you become a joiner. You join every organization. Women come in, groups of women, vultures, they come in, they check the dust. They look at your bank book, they say, what do you mean you're not going to be on the committee? You don't know what the organization is, you're on the committee right away. And I even joined the church because I love bingo. So I have... In every family, the mother classifies the children. I have 2 brothers. One, my mother always classified as the weak brother. What made him weak? He never looked for a job. So my mother assumed that the only reason this wonderful, brilliant boy didn't look for a job was because he was weak. My mother, God bless her, is a simple, old-fashioned type of mother. Her children were her whole, they were her whole world. There's no question about that. And this goes back to the days before women had modern conveniences like canasta and PTA. We lived in a neighborhood where, it was a very quiet neighborhood. You didn't hear much at night. All you heard were a few screams for help. And in those days, they used to have down in the basement, they had a laundry, and there were 4 feet of water in the laundry. So the guys used to advertise swimming pool. You didn't know till you moved in. This was the swimming pool. So you swam and you did your laundry at the same time. Only those guys weren't around, the ones that, what, you got another problem, lady? These guys weren't around in those days. And I tell you the truth, I didn't mind the 4 feet of water in the basement, but those alligators. But anyway. Now, my mother was not an easy woman to impress. I used to sing and I used to dance. And I used to beg my mother to come down to the theater to see me perform, because who do you want to impress? You want your mother to think you're wonderful, And mothers aren't like that. So finally, I prevailed upon her. There was a theater called the Lowe's Commodore Theater on 14th Street. I don't want you to think I'm Methuselah, I'm not that old. It's just that I was just that young when I started. Well, I didn't sleep good last night. But So anyhow, my mother came down. Now, my mother talks with a little dialect. She's Egyptian. But she wandered across to the other side of the border, you know, like the Israel side. So Mama came down to the theater finally, and I had her out front with my niece, who was a little girl at that time, and she saw the show. She saw the show. She came backstage afterwards, and she was amazed to find out that we actually had a dressing room, you know, with lights and modern plumbing and all that sort of thing. So she came in, and I said, "Well, Mama, how'd you like me?" She said, "You know, it's a very nice room here." I said, "Yeah, I know it's a very nice room here. How'd you like me, Mama?" She said, "Oh, you know, the show was wonderful. Wonderful. There was a very good movie and a very comfortable seats out there." I said, "Ma, I know the seats are comfortable, and I know that the movie was wonderful and everything. How did you like me?" She says, "You know, I never saw such costumes like the third act had, the most gorgeous costumes." I said, "Mama, I know you can hear me, and I know that you understand English. Me, I'm talking about your child. How did you like me?" She says, You should live to get the applause the singer in the second act got." I have a daughter who's a beatnik. And today, you don't try to fight these things with these kids, these teenagers in school. I don't fight it. I don't mind anymore that she wears the dirty sneakers and the sloppy sweaters that hang down to the crotch, and I don't mind so much. And I don't mind the worn out, faded blue jeans, but why a beard? Now and the way that they have a language all their own, who can understand it? Everything is a cat. I'm a cat, her father's a cat, her grandmother's a cat, even our dog is a cat. The only thing that isn't a cat is our cat. He is a kook. But so, you know, like all of these kids, when I talked to her about it, she said, "Well, Mother, you don't understand. Today it's important for a teenager to conform. I want to do everything the other girls in my class do." I said, "All right, honey, when you're a little older, we'll get your nose bobbed." Well, my daughter, she met a poet. I said, "Honey, how is he going to support you?" She said, "Don't worry, he has a nice income from the government." He's on relief, you know. But she brought him home. She said, "Mother, I want you to meet him. I'm going to bring him home for dinner." Well, our cook was off, so we couldn't have him for dinner that day. But no, we did. She brought him home. Well, I have never seen anyone eat like this guy. I don't know when he ate last. I was fascinated. You never saw sparks fly like this from a knife and a fork. We had wax fruit on the table after that. He ate this too. Whatever we had one of those rubber plants in the foyer. That disappeared. 3.5 hours this guy sat without letting up. Such endurance you never saw in your life. As he was leaving, I almost dropped dead. He had a bone 4 feet long in his mouth. My husband's shoe was on the other end. My daughter, after he left, my daughter came to me. She said, "Well, Mommy, what do you think of him?" I said, "Well, I think he's perfect, but not for you, for Howard Johnson's daughter." Well, anyway, it really bothered me. We were beginning to become antagonistic towards each other. My mother said to me, my mother came to me. My mother said, "Don't aggravate yourself over that child. She needs some good, old-fashioned, rigid discipline. Give her to me for a couple of weeks. You'll see a change in that child." Well, I sent my daughter over to Grandma. 4 days later, I called up and I said, my mother answered, and I said, "Hello, Mama, where is Robin?" She said, "Like man, she cut out to make the scene at the cleaners." You should see my mother now. Sits around all day long in the house beating the bongo drums between her legs. I don't mind her sitting with the bongos between her legs, but when she goes shopping, she should take them out. All right? I said, when I heard my mother talk like that, I said, okay, Mama, send Robin back to me. Well, she did. My little Robin bird came back to me, and I said, all right, honey, we'll do things your way. What is it you want me to do? What do you want Daddy and myself to do? We'll do anything to make you happy. If you feel that you have to live the way the rest of the kids in school live, fine, we'll go along with it. Well, she said, Mother, I'm the only one in the whole school who hasn't given a party. I said, all right, give a party. She said, but this is different. This is open house. Well, I said, give an open house. I don't know whose house they opened. And, of course, I was banished. God forbid you should be there when the kids have a party. So I went to a movie in the village, and when I came back, oh, you could hear this. Way out on the street, you could hear it for blocks. And I won't say that it was a wild party, but when I went to open the door, it wasn't there. So, well, I walked in, and what a sight. 35 kids, nobody wearing shoes, everybody with the bare feet. But piled up in the foyer with 35 pairs of sneakers. Now I want to ask you people a question. Have you ever been in a warm room with 35 pairs of sneakers? That can clear up a head cold in a minute. Well, but such characters. One guy was over in the corner telling himself jokes. Then after each joke, he would slap himself because they were dirty and he didn't want to hear jokes like One little group was gathered around an art instructor, and he was giving a lesson in modern painting with the smearing the oil, you know. You blend all the colors together, and he was using a white rag. A very expensive rag was my drape. But there was one idiot I couldn't take my... Oh, and I forgot to tell you, 3 young, intelligent men sitting in the middle of the floor having a very intellectual conversation, and there was a big argument. Should the girls chip in for the pizza pie or not when it came? But, and I forgot to tell you another thing. When I walked in, this one cat as they call him, came over to me with his chick. He had this chick, and this cat gave me a handful of skin, and the chick got mad because it was her skin. Well, anyway. But this one idiot, and I swear to you, I couldn't take my eyes off of this character, jumping up and down my white sofa, wearing a Roman toga with the sandals, you know, jumping up and down and hollering, "Hail Nero, Emperor of all Romans!" Well, oh boy, I'd had it. That point, I'd had it. I walked over, I grabbed him by the ear, I said, "Shame on you, is this the way to behave when your daughter has company?" Well,